I'm so pleased that two experts in educating children in emergencies, Zanti Ackerman and Sarah Dryden-Peterson, could join us today to help us focus our energy and ingenuity on the barriers to education that exist on the ground in Turkey. Sarah Dryden-Peterson, whom many of you also know, splits her time between the Harvard Graduate School of Education and the Center for Universal Education at Brookings. Today, Sarah will focus her talk on how we provide strong education and all that it requires, including curricula, language, certification, and belonging in the face of an unknowable future. The question
of 10 when I met her in a refugee camp. She had fled ongoing conflict in Democratic Republic of Congo. When she arrived in this refugee camp, there was ongoing fighting, not enough food to eat, and her family had been torn apart. Yet somehow she retained a bright smile, and I soon understood why. She told me education will lead me to my dreams for the future. And every day she put on her bright pink uniform and she went to school. Like most refugees around the world, Annette hoped and truly believed that she would soon return to her home country. That was until the day that her father planted bananas around their compound. Bananas are a slow to mature crop. You only plant them when you know you're going to be somewhere for a long time. For most Syrians in exile, the time has come, metaphorically, to plant bananas. And education is central to the planting of this future. Refugee children and youth need high-quality education that will allow them to be safe and engaged in the present, but also will enable them to be productive and happy civically and economically in the future. So how do we as a global community assist in doing this? We don't have all the answers, but we do have some important ones, and we also know what important questions to ask. I'd like to suggest that the most important question that we ask is, what will the future be? As educators and parents in any part of the world, we're always asking this question. As we think about what's important for our children to know and understand, we make our best predictions and we follow a path. The unknown future that refugee children face is extreme. But at the same time, decisions about appropriate curriculum, language, and certification all hinge on our answer to this question. Take the example of Henri. Henri was a Burundian refugee living in exile in Tanzania. When he was in primary school, he followed the Tanzanian curriculum in English and Kiswahili. Midway through secondary school, a policy shifted, and then he started following the Burundian curriculum in French and in Kirundi. When his refugee camp was closed, he fled to another camp and followed the Congolese curriculum. When he did return to Burundi after 18 years of exile, he was hopeful that he could join the university and take part in the reconstruction of his country. There wasn't any educational reintegration program available, no intensive language courses, and without enough fluency in French and no consistency in the curriculum he had followed, he was denied. We know what a future denied can lead to for individuals, for families, for communities, and we can't let this happen. To avoid Henri's educational experiences for contemporary Syrian refugees, we need to focus on a few dimensions of what we do know about the future. We know that exile is an integral part of refugees' futures. The average length of exile for a refugee is 17 years. That's the equivalent of a child's one shot at education, from birth through high school graduation. With this knowledge, we know that Syrians do not need temporary education programs. They need access to a complete education. And preferably, they need to be integrated into the national education systems of the country of exile. This inclusive approach is not easy in Istanbul, in Beirut, in New York, in Berlin. Imagine 1 out of 4 students in your own child's class recently having arrived from a deadly war. But integration in schools reflects what we all seek for our children: stability. To build a future in the midst of uncertainty, refugee children need teachers who are well-trained, a well-developed curriculum that builds skills and knowledge, and the possibility of certifying their learning. These elements are more likely to be present in national education systems than in refugee-only schools or in temporary programs. Being physically included in national schools is critical to building strong futures for refugee children, but this physical integration is only the first step for what really matters: support for learning. Over the past decade, we at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and the Center for Universal Education at Brookings have been researching refugee education. Our research supports the idea of integrating refugees into national systems and the dimensions of support for learning that can make this integration successful. I'd like to outline 4 critical dimensions for this support of learning. First, refugee children cannot learn if they are not physically and emotionally safe. Syrian refugee parents describe to us how they fear sending their children to school due to ongoing physical and emotional bullying. These experiences undermine stability not only for refugees, but also for national communities. Teachers need training and ongoing support to help refugee and national students understand each other and get along. Globally, this is the #1 request we hear from teachers. This training may seem a luxury, especially in countries with well-developed national education systems and teachers who are trained. It is not a luxury. Children who do not feel safe in school cannot learn, and they quickly become marginalized from their peers and communities. Second, refugee children cannot learn if they don't know the language. They need intensive language programs before enrolling in national schools and ongoing support through the first few years. I have been in too many classrooms where refugee teenagers cram themselves into tiny benches in primary school classrooms because that's where language learning happens. This is one quick pathway to dropout and disillusionment. Digital tools could play an important role in creating language and text-rich environments in the new language, but they're a complement for the relationships that encourage true immersion in a language. Third, refugee children's learning will not lead them to the future they imagine if it is not certified. Most of us probably don't even know where our diplomas are and may never have held our children's educational records. Yet without recognized certificates of learning, refugees are denied access to further education and to economic opportunities. In northern Kenya, we've worked hard in higher education to open a jointly certified program for Somali refugees with accreditation through Canadian and Kenyan universities. The intention is to keep open the possibilities for this unknown future. The same is essential for Syrian refugees. No matter where Syrian refugee children continue their education and seek employment in the future, they need to know that their previous learning will be recognized. Support to the creation of educational management systems that can be regionally integrated will be crucial. And finally, refugee children need to learn through education that they belong. We're horribly fixated on ideas of belonging that center on the nation-state and rest on exclusion. But the conflict in Syria and the resulting refugee crisis is forcing us to confront realities of migration and dilemmas of inclusion that we can't build walls to fix. While the ultimate future may be unknowable, the current and foreseeable reality is that Syrian children will be in school in exile, and the exclusive national identities often presented to them in history class and social encounters breed resentment and disengagement. How do we ensure that refugee children can develop a sense of belonging in the place that they are for the long-term present, with the open possibility that the future may be elsewhere? I know the next part of our time together today includes conversations towards action. As we embark on these discussions, I'd like to leave you with a thought and a question. No one flees their home lightly. Families sometimes flee when their physical safety is threatened. Families sometimes flee when their economic livelihoods crumble. Families almost always flee when they can't imagine a future for their children. And they will continue to move until they secure that future. In our world, that future is education. And now to all of us, the organizers, distinguished guests, let us put our minds together. How will we take what we know and move forward into this unknowable future to provide strong education for refugees with the learning supports that they require? Thank you.